Welcome everybody. We wanted to hold this. We were talking about some good ways of getting some informal knowledge out to the community, and this talking about topics. This is the one that was kind of at the front of everybody's mind because it's something we're in every day. So I got some panelists here from across the practice spectrum, and we're going to talk about BIM 360. So I'm Ben Rainier. We'll get to the panelists in a second. I just want to acknowledge MJ from the AIA is kind of helping us run things in the background. So thanks to MJ. And before I get started, if anybody's here that I just want to get if you want to use the show of hands method, if anybody wants to raise their hand just to indicate, are you familiar with BIM 360? Are you using it in your everyday environment? I'm kind of assuming people are because it's so it's become so endemic, but just go ahead and use the hand raising thing just to show me if you're using it. Yep. Okay. Not a shocker. So if you, I was gonna go through a thing where we talked about if you like it or don't like it. We can talk about that in a little bit. I'd rather just kind of jump into talking about the tool. But let me introduce some of the people that we have here. I'm Ben Rainier. I'm hosting here. I'm going to be kind of going in and out. We also have Josh Miller from Color Pacific, Devin Porter from DSP, and Kenny Lee from Canon Design. Do you guys want to just say a little bit about your place in practice and what you do for a living? We'll start with Josh.
Yeah, sure. So my name, like it says there, is Josh Miller. I live in Kansas City, Missouri, but I was living in Portland, Oregon for several years, working in the mass timber market. That's kind of my specialty. Work with a lot of structural engineers and architects on structural systems, and then anything from steel to concrete to mass timber to wood framing. So that's kind of my background. And at Color Pacific, we're working with mass timber companies across the United States, up into Canada, and across the globe on mass timber projects, detailing for fabrication and construction.
Great. And Devin, you want to go next?
Sure. So my name is Devin Porter. I am co-founder of DSP, which is Design Service Professionals PLC. We are an interdisciplinary design practice covering from architecture and interiors to industrial design, graphic design, web design. We are also coast to coast, so we are sitting in our home offices as most of the world has been for the last year. We've been doing that for 2 years before. And I come, as it says here, from a background at Gensler. It's where Ben and I crossed paths, and I was the Northwest Regional Technical Director for a couple of years out of the San Francisco office prior to relocating to Phoenix, which is where I'm sitting now. We're still in the startup mode of our company, but we're really excited about what we're building and looking forward to taking all of the greatest technologies and implementing them into a firm that really is progressive.
Great. Kenny, why don't you give yourself a little introduction?
Hi, everyone. I am Kenny Lee. I'm the Regional BIM Manager with Canon Design out of the Los Angeles office. So I work with Christopher, who invited me to extended the invite to this meeting today. I've been with the AC industry for plus 25 years and with Canon Design for about the last 9 years. And currently I lead Canon Design in the adoption and training of BIM and emerging technologies, including some of the software that you see there, Revit, BIM 360 Design. I specialize in Navisworks class detection. We're doing more point cloud laser scanning these days, tying into our construction folks and our in-house engineers. I also do data lighting analysis and also workflows relating to our cost estimators and construction group. So 5D BIM for cost estimation using Assemble Systems and BIM 360. And now we're getting into 7D BIM, tying in BIM for facility management with some of our government clients, DSA notably. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Kenny. That's a great segue, because the first thing I wanted to do before we got into any of the details and how people are using BIM 360 is kind of set the stage for why we picked this and talk about some history. So the reason that the TAP group chose 360 for this presentation is for kind of two reasons. One is that COVID has really made this a really central part of a lot of practices due to its, the necessity of going to a cloud environment for remote work. And so it's something that we've all been kind of thrown into, or maybe have just been using more of in the last year. And the other reason is that there's a lot of context. Autodesk has recognized that this is becoming a more increasingly large part of their offering, and they're starting to reposition and change the functionality of this tool in the background while we work. And some of that is good, frankly, for the architecture community, because we're getting new functions and new possibilities. It's great when software provider puts development energy into a tool that we're using, but there's also some chaos that comes with that. And I felt like you see a lot of presentations from people who are selling you the software, but there isn't a lot of space for discussion around this kind of tool within the community. So I wanted to make a little bit of space for that and talk about realistically what it can do, where it's going, what are some of the places where people are getting hung up, and also understand how, if you are in a remote environment with your design firm, there might be some functions of this that could replace other software or augment other software to make you more efficient, or even reduce the number of tools you're using on a daily basis. So, Josh, if you could help, let's talk through where Autodesk was, and then kind of where we are, and then what's right in the middle of release right now, to kind of put some of this in context. If you want to talk to or over these bullet points, can talk through that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, initially, when Autodesk started bringing in some cloud server implementations into the network, it was primarily focused on being able to collaborate with Revit models in the cloud with Autodesk, the A360 server. So it's primarily focused on cloud collaboration, working with your team remotely over the cloud versus on your own network through your own network server. And then there were some other offerings like Field and Glue. So a lot of general contractors were using Glue to take models and put them together. There was issue tracking integration within Glue, but it was kind of limited to just viewing models in a cloud environment, and kind of limited functionality as far as clash detection. And then there was also BIM 360 Field, which allowed you to upload project documentation to a cloud server, view the project documentation on a tablet or phone in the field, do punch list items, make markups, take photos, and paste it to the project documentation to build kind of like an as-built set of documents. And then, after those were mildly successful, Autodesk actually, began purchasing other, competitors, other companies that had started coming up with cloud-based solutions for the AEC industry. And they kind of took all that and started wrapping it into what was known as BIM 360 Docs. So this kind of combined the Revit cloud collaboration with Field, in a sense that you could host your project documentation, you could do issue tracking with the 3D model and the 2D set of documents. You could manage members and also work through design collaboration a little bit more efficiently, setting up schedules for publishing Revit models and viewing the history of when those Revit models have been updated, when they've been uploaded, and then, managing all of the project documentation via the cloud. And then going to the future, after the purchase of PlanGrid, BIM 360 is being rebranded as the Autodesk Construction Cloud, and really it's all about merging. I feel like the tenor of Autodesk has been to merge different fields of the AEC industry into one unified source of truth, as they say. So the new Autodesk Construction Cloud has Autodesk Build, which is kind of the new offering, taking a lot of the functionality that used to be in PlanGrid for contractors to manage the projects in the design phase, but it's also integrated with design collaboration and model coordination. So the idea really is that you begin a project in the cloud in design collaboration, move through pre-construction with model coordination, and all of that data follows with you into the construction phase with Autodesk Build. And then there's a couple more modules within the Autodesk Construction Cloud. There's a Takeoff, which is a new 2D takeoff module that's meant to be used with a symbol. And then there's also a cost module and an asset tracking module. So it's really meant to take you all the way from design through pre-construction into construction, and then over to project handoff and facilities management. So that's really kind of the it's more than just a cloud-based service. They're really trying to build a platform that aggregates project data to be, to generate more useful data for not only the designers, but the contractor and the building owner when the project is completed.
Yeah, I was very looking into because they're as the part of this that touches architects directly is that BIM 360 Design is more or less being renamed BIM Collaborate Pro as part of this, which is I feel like
right.
it's just it's really, there's maybe a few more features, but it's essentially a linear transformation for us. But the really interesting thing to me is going in and reading the documentation on their website. It's like buried almost in a way. This construction cloud is very much aimed at the construction and ownership industry, and design is like 1/4 in the corner of that. So they must have, they've identified that they have a customer base that's much larger than the design community with this release, and it's very interesting, and maybe tells some of the future of what they're intending to do, that design is now part of a larger suite of tools that they're not really dividing it up anymore. They're saying, here's all the tools for build, there's design tools as part of that, and then there's these other things for the construction and post occupancy community, which is is a pivot for them.
Ben, if I could just tag on there, I remember in 2012 I was at a TAP event that was being hosted at Stanford University, and there were a lot of really wonderful presentations. But the one that struck me, and just to this day is continuing to ring in my ear, and is part of where I think we need to be planning, and if you haven't already, but it was essentially this phrase, 80% less annotation. And if you consider what what BIM 360, what the whole collaborative platform that they're building enables, it is a model as deliverable, right? And that means that we can have embedded information that allows us to take all of these text fields and all of this annotation and actually cut 80% of it out. That was the projected target. And so it's something that, like I said, rings in my ears every time I think, where are we headed as an industry and what do we need to be preparing for?
Yeah, and that does seem to be, there's a lot, when you start talking about that, there's so many follow-on discussions that we're already starting to have, they're just going to intensify. And I feel like you've said, I think that the people on the panel kind of agree that this is somewhat an inevitability. Like architects can engage and drive what model-based delivery means to us to make sure that it works for us, but it doesn't. Saying that it's not going to be part of a project process, especially on larger complex projects, is kind of that's no longer really an option for our community already, and it's only going to get more involved. The amount of data that we're passing over is going to become greater and greater as time goes on, and it's going to be really it's going to require new tools and new methods to make sure that we're passing over design information properly as part of that. So
yeah, and that move toward this new base, which is in the construction world, it's just proof of that.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm on Team Engage. I work mostly in the design build community, so it's pretty easy for me to say that. But it is going to drive changes in delivery, which, you know, I don't feel like Autodesk is necessarily leading this. They're not causing these changes, but they're certainly responding to them, and they're certainly kind of catalyzing and enabling them by trying to pivot their software to support that kind of thing, because they see you've got owners and contractors asking for this in order to make things more efficient and more trackable, and then they're seeing a new market and they're responding to that, and it's really kind of dragging all of this forward as part of that whole process. So let me go to the next slide. You know, this is context. I want to jump into what we have here and now, but keep that in the back of our heads. And when we get into the Q&A, if we want to talk about that, any of this stuff, I think it's super interesting, really important if you're thinking about the future of the profession, and we can return to it. So zooming way in from that 30,000 foot view, I wanted to get this group to cover the basics, and I'll be the sort of the remote hand here, and this is a little awkward, but when panelists are speaking, I'll be paging through a demo to show you some of this stuff. But there's kind of four-ish features that we just wanted to walk through to make sure that everybody had a baseline understanding of the possibilities of the software. So I didn't really, firmly assign these to anybody in the panelists. If you guys want to raise your hand about, well, we can start with the dumbest one, which is just file sharing. Does anybody feel like they want to walk people through the file sharing functionality in F360?
Yeah, I'd like to talk about it because we've been implementing this in our own team pretty heavily. So instead of using like a tool like ShareFile or SharePoint, what we've been doing is hosting all the project documentation in BIM 360, and it has some really great functionality. It mentions here that you can host Word documents. You can actually open a Word document and begin to edit it within the cloud. So BIM's kind of, yep. So it's pretty useful. Yep. So it's just a really wonderful functionality because, if you've worked with a large team of people before, you know that there's usually a lot of Word documentation flying around. And when I worked at Swinnerton in the past, we had a central file server where people would organize the project documentation, through pre-construction and construction management. And it was all kind of on our file server. But, those, when you're on a file server, it's really hard to work collaboratively on a document. We were kind of migrating to ShareFile and SharePoint for that kind of work. And it's just a lot more useful to have that within the context of the project where the project documentation is more easily accessible. And then, you could host things like PDFs. We would host DWG drawings that we would get from third-party vendors. We would host IFC models that we'd get from third-party vendors. And so it's just a really useful hub for collecting project documentation, at its very core.
Yeah, I know that in my practice, we've been using it as the collaboration hub for the design team primarily. So it's where, it's a safe place for working documents. We have been using a little bit for deliverables, but primarily it's that kind of living, like the way that we used to use SharePoint, frankly, we've kind of pivoted to using 360. Devin or Kenny, do you guys have any other ways that you've been using this, or has that been kind of the methodology?
Just like if you go to the models, this is also a great way to compare models and the versions of the models. So for instance, if you click on the version little icon, or go back for a second, I guess,
Sure.
for a second.
Oh yeah, it's subversioning.
Keep the version of all the versions, and then there's a compare version. So this is something I think it gets kind of overlooked and underutilized. So if you go down to compare versions on the bottom, oops.
Yep.
And then let's say you click, want to see the current version with, let's say, a couple versions back. Go ahead and
I'm gonna
hit
go way
something.
back. Let's see if this makes it choke. We get live demo stuff going on here.
Yeah.
But
But this is huge. So this, you could see this opens the door to a lot more transparency for change management. And for a project manager or somebody who's not in the model continually, this could be huge to see what it's trying to track. It's going through a lot of versions, so hopefully it doesn't break, but it's going to look.
I'll fix it if it doesn't work. Yeah.
What was deleted, what was modified, what was deleted and added in the model, and it will kind of color code this. I think originally I saw this first in Assemble Systems, and they bought out Assemble Systems, so they added this to BIM 360 a few years later. But
I'm gonna go back a few instead of a billion. It's doing there's an auto publish in this file, so that's why I'm trying to go back far enough that we get a change, because it might come back with no change.
Sure. But this is just one of many ways. You can look at it here. There's a lot of backups. It's automatically creating a backup every time the team syncs, every time the team publishes, obviously. And there's a couple different ways that you can look at it in document management, or you can also look at this in sort of the model design management portion as well.
While this is chugging, I'm going to let it try and load. But the thing that I didn't realize is that the compare tool works on kind of everything. It works on, you can use it to do PDFs, you can use it on the 3D models, you can use it in the 2D views in the design collaboration section. It's pretty comprehensive, which I thought was really interesting. And it's the same looking tool in all of those places as well, which is nice because it makes it feel like it's unified. So they've been doing some work in the background to expand the functionality since the last time I checked this out. And if this doesn't work, and this is the terror of the live demo, I do know it will work. I did a little test on it for one of the PDF views, so I can just show it there, which would be simple enough.
Well, I'd like to piggyback off of this a little bit, Ben. So in the new platform, BIM Collaborate Pro, we're talking about going to the future. They've really worked to expand the model comparison. And so what it'll do now is that every time you share or consume a model, it'll mark that as the shared version, and it'll actually prompt you to compare what's been changed in the model before you share again. So it'll take you through kind of a change log of what's been modified in the model since you last shared this with other members of the team. And then another nice feature is you can establish watch groups. So you can actually select specific elements of the project to watch as design progresses, and it'll alert you when those elements have been changed or modified in somebody else's model. So let's say you have like a plumbing consultant and you wanted to watch the plumbing equipment to make sure that it had been updated to what's been specified for the project. You can select those elements, and then the server would notify you when those have been updated in the model.
I think I might have. It obviously knows that we're presenting, and it's doing the thing that happens in all demonstrations. So let me cheat and go to here to plans, where I've got a much simpler version of this that's based around a floor plan, and I can show I can at least show the graphic appearance of that compare tool. So if you're in a view here where you're looking at stuff, it's this button, the 2 arrows button here, and this one it won't. I think I'm just kind of going too far back. But oops. What's it doing to me now? There we go. Could blame my internet on this too. So here you can see this is in a PDF actually, but it's actually doing since it's a PDF that's been parsed by 360, it does a little bit of work behind the scene to try and pull it apart. It's actually showing you the components of that PDF that are different between version 1 and version 2, similar to what kind of function you would have in a Bluebeam. What it can do, the thing that makes it really interesting to me, and let me try this one last time here, is the ability for it to then do the exact same kind of behavior on, oh, you know what I was doing? You know how I broke it? I broke it because I was trying to compare two uploads that were not the same file. It was probably tracking. It was probably making a list of every single object in the file. It was just sitting there and chugging. But you can do the same kind of thing for 3D, and it gives you really similar graphics, and it works really well. I don't want to waste our time waiting for my my internet to load a bunch of models, so I might kick out a showing the change stuff in 3D. But yeah, that's a great feature, and works really well in my experience when we've used it internally, and that is a feature that I've used live before. And I also wanted to talk through, let me figure out, because we kind of jumped ahead a little bit and track changes. Does anybody want to raise their hand and walk through markups and issues as well? We could start with markups because those are fairly simple. I can do it too. so the when you go into a 3D model, and hopefully most people are aware of some of this, there's two different kinds of ways of marking up. One is just called markups, and once again, this is similar to what we're talking about with the change tracking. It works identically in 2D and 3D and PDFs and in Revit files, so you can actually mark up. It just sort of does one kind of markup, and it's not, I don't think these tools are quite as maybe as sophisticated as some of the, there's not as many tools as exist in say Bluebeam, but where it really, for me, really works well is that it's all in the same environment. You can do it directly on the working files. If you have, you can go in, if people are there, if their publish works with the plans, you can do these markups in the Revit views as well, which that gives you the access. The viewing gives you access to the actual Revit objects, so you can do some model query as well. And then it's really nice. I like the interface that they've come up with, which is that you have this browser of them, and you can filter them by user. It's a little more, to me, it's a little more straightforward than other markup methodologies in terms of walking through and doing any sorting. Is anybody else on the panel, have you guys been using this? Do you have anything to add about just the pure markup tools?
I'd just like to add, what we're starting to see is Autodesk, not too long ago, a few months ago, they released an add-in that for some of our projects, design build projects, we started to track some of the issues. So what they're allowing, though, is as you create these markups or these issues and you assign it to kind of a reviewer or a responsible party, now what's great is that if you're constantly in Revit and you prefer to see things and you don't necessarily go to the site on a daily basis where you get most of the things done, now the issue tracking is starting to show up as an add-in in Revit, where you start to get a little pop-up on the side, and you can kind of kind of track the issue to completion. And that's, again, it could be used on the design side of it as well as the construction side of it, but it's just something that it's going to continue to grow in popularity. Again, it's just kind of this one-stop shop where you can just, you know, go to whichever environment you're familiar with. If you're a project manager, you don't have to necessarily be in the Revit model. You can be in BIM 360 or, you know, to view the model and view the markups and the issues or the red lines. Or if you're a model manager and you're constantly in the Revit model and you don't vice versa go as much to the BIM 360 site, I think that's where the future is. Autodesk is trying to integrate all these things. You've probably heard of BIMTrack and Revisto and some of these other viewing softwares that create issues that kind of made a living. I think now Autodesk is trying to integrate this all into their BIM 360 platform and just be a one-stop shop and kind of eliminate some of these side add-ins that kind of taking the best of all the best worlds. And if they can't imitate it or create a better version, it seems like they tend to acquire that company. So I just want to add.
Yeah, and just to kind of put that in context, so like the markups is like a very simple Bluebeam-based thing. Issues is an additional, like it's a part of markups where you can create you can kind of package markups into a larger item, like almost something you would use in task management software. And the thing that's really I think is really cool about the issues tool is that you can assign it, you can give it a due date, you can track it to completion. It's visible, like you said, in Revit now. It's visible on the 3D, the apps that they have for like iPad and iPhone, so you can actually track them using mobile devices. It's architects are kind of the last people to adopt task management software, but I think that this is actually a really good process for model QA. I've used these to great success, even when they were like back in beta, when they didn't have half the functions they have now. Not in beta, but they were like an early release back when it was like in teams. If you are working in a situation where you're not the architect of record, you're the design architect, and somebody else is owning the model, but you need to be able to give feedback. It's a really good way to know that your feedback is getting picked up, is to use issues as a way to like tag, this is a change that I've requested. And then that allows your review meetings with the team to go that much quicker, because you can actually use the issues as a way to track what's been picked up and what hasn't, and you can add sketches and do whatever you want with these as well now, which is really, really nice. Gonna stop talking and open it back up to Josh or Devin or Kenny if you guys have anything else to add about this tool. I think this is a really nice piece of the program.
Yeah, I mean, I really love issues. You know, from a contractor's perspective, on the other end of this, you know, we use issues extensively during the pre-construction phase of a project to communicate with the design team. And what's nice about issues is that you don't even have to be in the BIM 360 environment to participate. You know, as long as you set up your project so that, you know, the people that are getting assigned issues receive email notifications, they'll get the issue directly to their inbox. And if they respond to the issue there, reply to that email, it'll automatically populate the issue and mark it as answered. The other thing that I really like about issues is that there's so many categories for creating an issue. You know, there's design categories or coordination categories. And now there's with the new Autodesk Construction Cloud, there's even more categories like markup or punch list things. And it's really nice because, you know, Autodesk is doing a lot of work into what they're calling insights, which is like a machine learning plugin or module for Autodesk Docs that will kind of learn. Well, it'll learn from your projects, and it'll kind of, you know, as long as you're fastidious about assigning the root cause of why an issue crept up or what issues you're having, you know, as long as you're fastidious about categorizing your issues, it'll actually give you insight after the project is complete of, you know, here's what happened on the project. You know, here's the categories that we really struggled with on this project as far as issues. And then now, you know, with the new Autodesk build, you can elevate issues into RFIs, you know, during the construction phase of a project, and really link a lot of documentation together that way. So I'm really a big fan of issues and use it pretty extensively.
Yeah, as with any of this task stuff, I feel like it's definitely aimed at the construction. Like you look at it, Josh, and you know exactly what it is.
Yeah.
I have consistently misused it in my own practice to do things that it was, you know, so I've ignored like root cause and stuff like that because I'm using it to track, you know, intended changes, but it does work to coordinate the process through a needed change. And I think it's nice having something to pin to the model or to the drawing that's persistent. And that's the thing where I've been very happy about it, is that it doesn't go away when somebody you know, doesn't open that file anymore. You know, it's if you're using it in the design file, in the Revit model, it never, you know, nobody stops working in the Revit model. And so if the issue tracking lives with that, then there's no way for somebody to ignore it by just never opening that PDF again. So I, you know, to me, for architects, it's somewhat limited in the sense that the markup tools aren't really sophisticated, and so you can't, like, you know, do a really complicated sketch to give someone design direction. But you could do that complicated. What I have done is I've done that complicated sketch or rendering or whatever we want to do, and I've attached that to it as an image, and I've said, this is just a pin here to track that we're making this change. And then we can come back to it and be like, did this actually get picked up? And it's been assigned, and it works that way. Instead of using something like Planner or some other kind of more software industry side issue tracking or assignment tracking software, I can just do it in this, and it does the one dumb thing I want it to do, which is like take a task and give it to a person, and then I can just use, you know, keep it inside of the program that I'm already using, instead of trying to go outside to another platform or another company or another website or something like that. So that's the way I've been using it, in the usual dumb way that doesn't use like probably 3/4 of what it's intended for the construction industry. I haven't had anybody use it for RFIs yet. I'm curious to know if anybody here has. I wouldn't mind it, but you know, Procore is such a dominant, and Procore and 3 other companies are so dominant in that field. I'm wondering if it's gonna come through, or if there's gonna be transfer or some other kind of CA.
Well, I think I misspoke a little bit, Ben, because, you know, the idea is that issues are being used as RFIs. There's a new RFI feature in the new Autodesk Construction Cloud as part of Build, and I was just saying that issues could be transferred to RFIs. You know,
okay.
If an issue wasn't resolved and it needed to become an RFI, it could go through that transition.
Yeah, I can see that being useful if you're using it for kind of a sub RFI level thing, and if it becomes something that becomes a real need for an RFI. Because the construction industry, you know, in CA for architects, one of the problems that you can end up in a situation where everything's an RFI, and you look at it like, this isn't an RFI, this is a change request, this is an RFI, this is just like, right, you know, a question that somebody could ask me in person, but they send it via email. So having better communication tools, especially when we go to model-based deliverables, where there's probably a lot of unintended data that we're sending along, that doesn't have right of reliance, it's probably important that we have better, like, kind of background communication just to allow that knowledge transfer to take place. Does anybody, as long as we're talking about this, as long as I'm on the screen, does anybody want to on the panel want to raise their hand and explain what plans is? Because I think I know, but I'd rather have it from somebody else. And I know that people in my office ask what the difference between plans and a PDF in project files is.
I could explain that, Ben. I think, you know, as far as the scope of what we're talking about today, plans is kind of where your finished product comes from. So if you do a print from your modeling environment, so from Revit, you print off a document set, you would then upload it to plans as a document set, and you'll see to the right of the title where it says set. So, you know, right now we're looking at the 50% CD set of drawings. So it'll split out each sheet. It'll automatically name it and tag it with the title, and then it'll add hyperlinks between sheets that'll take you from a plan view to a detail section. And then it'll track, you know, versioning. This is used extensively. I would say this is where the bulk of the work is done from a contracting perspective. You know, the plan section is what's used to make sure that we're looking at the right version of the, you know, the right set of drawings. And, you know, markups and issue tracking, it all happens in plans as well as in project files. So I'd say the main difference is that plans only hosts PDFs, and it's meant to be kind of like plan grid, you know, splitting out PDFs and automatically doing, you know, naming of the sheet and the numbering of the sheet.
Cool. Yeah, that's useful. So plans is sort of what I've been told, and what I've always repeated is that PDFs, you know, you can load PDFs, and well, I'm going to show a hidden switch in a second, but PDFs, you can get all the functions you need in terms of markup and issue tracking, all the rest of that here, and it's great for just loading in progress and stuff like that. If something becomes an official release, then if you put it into plans, you get that feature of it splitting it into views and like really making it look, doing the hyperlinking and being giving you that additional level of control that's similar to like a document control that you'd see. As long as we're on this topic, before I forget, there is a lot of the markup tools and stuff won't work in PDFs in 360 unless you enable it. And if you go to PDF viewer in any folder, you can set it browser or BIM viewer. BIM viewer is normally the default, but some people's templates have browser set, and if it's set as browser, then it'll open in whatever your default web browser PDF viewer is. So if you come back from this presentation and you open up a PDF and you go, well, it's not showing me this, it's in like, you know, it's opening in a new tab in my browser, it's because this setting is not set properly. Okay, so talked about file management, talked about marking up. We talked about change tracking and some of the task manager stuff with issues. You know, we've got about 12 minutes left. I thought about jumping into Q&A unless somebody has something that we didn't cover on the panel. Okay, so with that, I was going to kind of just keep a record of what questions people had as we go with this, but I'll open it up. If you guys can, I guess we can do it. It's a small group, so if people want to raise their hand and talk, or if they want to put something in the chat, either of those things will work. So if you guys have a question or you have something to talk about, you know, something to bring to the table in terms of the ways that you're using this stuff that we didn't talk about, or you have a question about the earlier topic we were talking about, which is the kind of the future of where this is going with model-based delivery. Okay, so start with Todd. I'm going to MJ, could you unmute Todd? And he can just talk to it. Hi.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Okay, so I think I got it. Sorry, you guys might have noticed I was driving back when I got here. Sorry I was late. But okay, so the way I'm looking at it, some of the challenges we've had is, I think this overcomes them, which is working remotely. We're working on a OneDrive. We can't break it into work sets or anything like this. And by bringing this in is I might be working, or I'm going to start working with Brian Dykes pretty soon. Multiple people can work on the model simultaneously, right? And I think I got that part of it, right? And then, but what I really kind of like is the last part of the presentation. This is almost like Bluebeam, where you can carry it around. You can get that functionality, that markup from my iPad to my team, my iPad to Brian's team, whatever the hell it happens to be, a photograph. And so, because, one of the biggest troubles with working remotely for a small firm is, every single thing we have to do, we have to scan and then email and blah, blah, blah. It's really bogus, for lack of some better words from the past, right? So it's like Bluebeam. You can share models. Is it? It seems to be pretty. More of a question. What's the word? Intuitive. Like it doesn't seem like it's that hard to kind of bring on board and get going. Is there a significant uptick in the learning curve or any of this, or
Oops.
if you're working in Revit, you know what you're doing? This is just sharing stuff, right?
So I'm going to call this learning curve just for my own. This is for me more than anybody else. But the I'm going to set this up and then I'm going to go to the panel. If you're using this as someone who's familiar with Revit, but you are probably going to be outside of the Revit file on a project and you want to use this for QA, design markup, I mean, I think that I've definitely used it specifically for that task. The things that I'll say, and then before I promise I'll shut up, is that it has a learning curve that's, you know, it's, to me, actually the way that I know some people have gotten their design directors or their outside parties into it is actually through the iOS app, because it's a little more simple and it's dedicated to like markup and model browsing, and it kind of looks the same. Sometimes the UI, like the user interface, it goes in a slightly different direction than like Bluebeam or some of these other things. So there is, I don't want to say there's no learning curve, but I do think that a lot of these functions are very straightforward. And especially if you watched a couple of videos on how issues work, which is, you know, maybe the most complicated bit, it would really, it's not complicated in any kind of traditional sense.
Cool.
Anybody else want to jump in on this?
One quick follow up to that, and
Yeah.
then I'll get on to someone else's. I think you said, okay, so if I have a team that's working in a model, one of my biggest challenges is I can't look at it either, right? And if I get into Revit, when I open it up, after they get out of it, blah, 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 you know, I have to go to each sheet, of course, right? You know, PDF or Revit to look at it. Is this kind of a peephole that you can see the sheets in progress while, like, I just want to go look at, I don't want to interrupt anybody, go look at the stair section to get a dimension or something. Can I see that in real time as any member of the team, or simply as the head of the team?
So that there's something we need to talk about, which is publishing, and I don't want to answer the question myself, so I'm going to kick it to somebody else. Who wants to take on explaining like model access and publishing?
All right, and then I'm out.
Okay. Kenny, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, well, I'll just kind of cover what you started earlier, is that this is something that you definitely want to plan and organize your teams early. You want to sort of document this workflow, just like any new technology. Usually you'll try to document this if you have a BIM execution plan for the project. There's different strategies too, namely 3 on how you want to link your models to. We didn't really talk about that, but these kind of workflows determine how fast the model could perform, if you're going to use live linking or you're going to use sort of a shared publish workflow, or the third one is the consume, where you kind of digest the changes, and let's say I'm working with a structural engineer, they can accept, kind of review the changes and then accept those changes, and then kind of or potentially reject the changes and then have a conversation before they just run with it if they have issues with those. So there's a lot of sophistication built in, but kind of getting off the ground, it's fairly intuitive just to kind of get the pieces rolling. But I think that's where you need to have sort of a kickoff meeting, pull the players in and find out if this is new to them, have a session like we are today, and just kind of look at the pros and cons and determine what are the appropriate workflows, and then just kind of teach them too, what are the ways we can automate publishing the packages on the model on a weekly basis if it's set up to be published, or perhaps you're setting up as live linking, that could be a good or a bad thing. Whereas if they're in a live linking situation, then they're seeing every time you save and push out your model. If you're working live in the model, they're going to see those live changes as soon as they open the model. But the thing is, maybe an outside person, they're only going to see the changes of when you publish. So let's say an owner or contractor, somebody downstream. So those are things that you got to keep in mind and make sure that people are getting the right information at a given time, so that they don't maybe run off with something that was unintended, where it's meant to be a placeholder. Let's say you have live linking, and they're just peering into the model just because now it allows you to have a access, and so it's still high level communication, collaboration still appropriate, but those are the things and conversations that you have to kind of apply to. So publishing, again, just like a sheet set, you publish what sheets you want and the model views, and you coordinate, and then you can set that on a schedule, so that the beauty of that it gets automated, and you're not having to take the model down, post on a third-party site like Box.com or SharePoint or any of these other platforms. So, where you make up in efficiency, you definitely have to communicate with the team and just let them know, so that everyone's using the software the way it was sort of intended, and we're all kind of buying in on the processes set in. So there's no confusion and misinterpretation of when the model should be shared and so forth.
Yeah. So to piggyback, what you're seeing in 360 isn't to the minute live from what everyone's saving from Revit. There's an action called publish that sends views and 3D information to the cloud. And the reason that they do that is because there's functions in this, like the compare versions. So you can see here it says version 57. That's how many times it's been published. There's actually nothing in this software that keeps you from publishing every day or every hour, except for that the auto publish feature only works weekly, because I think they're trying to limit the amount of load on the servers that they have. But you can manually publish as often as you want. The feature that's missing, and that we found a solution for using other software, is the ability to print from Revit and then auto upload the PDFs into a cloud environment, which is, it's funny that doesn't exist. I'm anticipating that it will get picked up eventually. Right now we're using Imagine. It makes a tool called Clarity that's one of the things it does. It's an automation tool generally, but it's really good at making PDFs and uploading them. So we've been using that to do daily uploads for people that really want to do markups in the cloud. Having people do a daily publish is also something that I've seen teams do in order to make sure that there is a reasonably recent version of the project available. Anybody want to weigh in on that? Any follow up on that, and then I can go to somebody else.
Maybe if you could just go back and just show them the packages, like the history. Do you have any, if you go back to the model?
Yeah. So if I go back to design collaboration, so we didn't really go into the workbenches here because that's in an hour. It's kind of another level of detail, but there's a separate environment called design collaboration that lets you track the process of publishing, and it shows you a timeline of when things and has a little more functions in there. For consultants in a instance of 360, it becomes really important because you can start to track multiple models and multiple user groups against each other in an environment where everyone's got control over their own stuff, and you can set the amount that people can see or accept change from other people's work. Kenny, do you have something do you want to talk through this a little bit more?
Yeah, I think we're probably running out of time, but again, that's a way to just get the history of, let's say, any milestones, any significant publishes that you can again go back and compare and just kind of view the whole project history. So you can kind of figure out and backtrack as needed to really have a full transparency of the project, and this is obviously important. It wasn't available in any other previous platform where you have so much transparency and history to view the models, and again, it's opening. So again, when you have that circle, that's where you have to maybe consume something before you you use that update and so forth. So it's a great feature. Definitely gives you a full tracking of version history and kind of view at any point in time of the project, which is extremely important at times, as you know.
Great. And then Brian, I see you have your hand up too. Did you have something you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, I was just curious if you guys have used the model coordination tool at all. I know it's free now, and I haven't had a chance to play with it.
So I'm not sure I know what tool what you're talking about. Model coordination tool. Is that
It's
is
like
that
the clash detection.
Oh, no, I haven't used
Yeah.
the new clash detection stuff. Josh, I know you've played with that. Kenny, it sounds like you have.
Yeah, I do.
Correct.
You guys want to
I
talk to it?
I just
Yes,
want to quickly say it's good, but I still prefer old methods right now. They're still refining it. Right now, still trying to find out ways, and contractors are still trying to find out ways. Right now, it's looking kind of model to model, but if you're used to looking at it from a Navisworks workflow and compare it, to me, I think there's more established practices in Navisworks still to give you full control and track things a little bit better, because you're going to get a lot of false clashes, kind of things that you got to filter out. That's the only thing I have to say. I'm looking forward to as it gets better, tacking on, but that's just my early experience utilizing it. So we haven't really utilized it on the active projects with contractors, although we're very interested in tracking its progress. But expect a lot more clashes. So if the numbers are going to scare you away, and filtering, time to filter the non-clashes out, that's something that I would be aware of.
Great.
I guess
Josh?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, no, I kind of want to reiterate what Kenny said. It is a new offering, and so there are quite a few clashes. But as somebody who has worked in BIM model coordination from a contractor's perspective, I'd say that there's a lot more advantages than disadvantages, because one of the most frustrating things from a model coordination standpoint was the weekly model coordination meetings. You might have 10 or 12 different companies with 2 or 3 people from each company at a meeting each week, who don't have access to your Navisworks files, and so you're basically managing the project from your inbox, collecting clash reports, exporting those from Navisworks, sending those to the team via email. Whereas with the new model coordination in the cloud, it's you can look at a clash, elevate that clash to an issue, assign that issue to a specific user. And like we talked about before, that if they have the add-in in Revit, if they're using Revit or AutoCAD, an Autodesk product, they can see the issue within their environment and address it, as they're modeling throughout the week. So it's really reducing. What I found is it's reduced the time that we have to actually be in these model coordination meetings, because the issues are happening in real time. Everyone has visibility on what the clashes are and what the issues might be. And to me, it's kind of a fair trade-off, the amount of extra time that I have to spend going through the non-clashes in order to increase that visibility on the project. Because it's just less work for me as a BIM manager, managing all these different companies via my inbox. Now it's all happening in the cloud, and a lot more work gets done via each individual participant's initiative, rather than having to constantly engage and make sure that things are happening.
That's
good to hear. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great. It sounds to me like the advantage might be, I can't even remember the software name at this point, but I've used software for model QA. Like I had a project where we had a certain standard of data in the Revit model across the project that we had to include for our owner's model. And rather than doing it manually, we used a system that did auto checks against, some pretty simple stuff. And then people could go in and resolve issues live by uploading revised versions of their model. or tag, similar to what you do with the Clash. And it was really convenient because people could do it asynchronously, and you would know when they'd addressed stuff because it would show up on your side immediately. So I can imagine that being really useful for clash detection, and that people, you don't have to sit there. I mean, you always have the meetings where you sit down and you go, who's going to move their stuff, but at least you can resolve the process of those clashes resolving in real time outside of the model, and people can provide their solutions outside of a meeting, which is also useful because it reduces the number and type of meetings you have to have. So I can see that being useful. I'm looking forward to it because I'm a moderate to heavy user of Navisworks, and in all the years I've been using it, I've never learned to love it. So I'm not sad to see it go to the wayside. I don't know, Kenny, you might disagree with me. I know there are people that love themselves some Navis, but I don't really count myself in that crew. Are there any other questions, or it looks like we're coming up. We'd allowed ourselves another 10 minutes with this group, but I want to respect everyone's time. Does anybody have any closing remarks or closing questions? Otherwise, I can just say thank you to all you guys for showing up and talking to all of this, and I really appreciate it. And if anybody has any follow-up questions or wants to hook up with further information about what we do here at TAP, feel free to email me or the AIA, and we can get you in touch with some of our panelists or experts. So thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Chris.
Thanks,
Thank
Juan.
you,
Thanks,
everyone.
Ben, for setting.
All right. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye, Ben.
Well, usually you have